President Joe Biden decided to go after the home of conservatism and now is realizing that he is entirely out of his league. Don't you think it's quite a coincidence that very shortly after he had his photo op with Governor Ron DeSantis showing unity, that we now have this issue in Cuba? Governor DeSantis, however, has made an absolutely spectacular, genius move that is going to completely defeat this effort by Joe Biden and Washington, D.C. to flip the script or change the narrative. Like I referred to in the earlier video, they're trying to distract conservatives. They're trying to make conservatives talk about Cuba and not talk about the complete and total abject failure of the Joe Biden administration. Now, what am I talking about? Well, to explain this, we've got to jump into the Wayback Machine and head to ancient Rome. Tyrants would distribute largesse, a bushel of wheat, a gallon of wine, and a sesterce. And then everybody would shamelessly cry, "Long live the king." Sound familiar? Free checks, free money? The evil was not in bread and circuses per se, but in the willingness of the people to sell their rights as free men for full bellies and the excitement of the games, which would serve to distract them from other human hungers, which bread and circuses can never appease. Marcus Tullius Cicero. The moral decay of the people was not caused by the doles and the games. These merely provided a measure of their degradation. Things that were originally good had become perverted. Lilies that fester smell far worse than weeds. Now, by these practices and enticements, the ancient dictators so successfully lulled their subjects under the yoke that the stupefied peoples, fascinated by the pastimes and vain pleasures flashed before their eyes, learned subservience as naively, but not so creditably, as little children learn to read by looking at bright pictures in books. This is what's going on in Cuba. Because remember, the story is they're not marching for voting rights. They're marching and protesting because of shortages of food caused by sanctions, primarily from D.C., but they're also protesting because the internet has been shut off. And that's key. You see, their bread and circuses have been taken away. And you see, that's the real goal. To get Cuba, like so many other, under the yoke of bread and circuses. AP accidentally told this truth. Demonstrators in Havana protest shortages, rising prices. Well, why haven't they been protesting this entire time? The lack of voting rights and the lack of democracy. See, it's kind of an all-of-a-sudden thing that's very convenient. But you see here, AP kind of gives you an insight into what they're trying to do now. Cuba is going through its worst economic crisis in decades, along with a resurgence of coronavirus cases, as it suffers the consequences of U.S. sanctions imposed by, you ready for this? The Trump administration. As if Cuba hasn't been being sanctioned since literally before I was born. They've been under sanctions for decades. Now, what is that genius move? What is that fantastic move that was made by our governor? Here you go. Florida's governor, Ron DeSantis, wants U.S. companies to give Cuba free internet amid its continued protests. Now, you watch how fast those protests stop once they have their circuses back. Once they have their bread and their circuses, they will go back to life as usual, just like they were living a month ago when nobody was talking about this. Nobody was talking about this a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, literally a matter of days, after Joe Biden comes down to Florida and sits next to literally the leader of the conservative movement and declares unity, blah, blah, blah. Now we have this. Our governor is a smart man. He is an educated man, and he has been around these people for a long time. And he knows how to play the game. Today, he was here in Baker County. I'm not in Baker County, but very close. Talking about giving $3,000 bonuses to teachers. Not $1,000, $3,000 bonuses to teachers that are certified to teach, you ready for this? Civics. Not politics, not the Constitution, civics. Civics is the idea of getting involved in your local government at the closest possible level to the people. School boards, sheriffs, town councils, mayors. That's the key. That's what our governor values, and he knows it's the secret to the future. It's the secret to the future. If you want to put Christian values back into government, it's going to start there. It's not going to start in D.C. and then trickle down every 4 years. That ain't going to work. This whole nonsense in Texas that you've heard about with the Democrats walking out to deny quorum to the remaining conservatives, or I should say Republicans, really, in Texas. That wouldn't work in Florida. You know why? Because in our state house, we have such a huge majority of conservatives, there's not enough Democrats in Florida elected to deny quorum. Let me say that again. In Florida, in the state house, we have almost a 2-to-1 majority, meaning they could all walk out and business could go on as usual. Our Senate has the equivalent of a 60-40 majority, 24-16. We don't have a single Democrat, not one Democrat, not one liberal, not one progressive on our Supreme Court. In fact, the Supreme Court of the state of Florida is so conservative, every single member is a member of the Federalist Society. See, that wouldn't fly. It wouldn't even work, what's going on in Texas and Florida. And if you want to see a hero, an absolute hero, look no further. Jenna Ellis left the Republican Party today. Why? Well, the mainstream media would have you believe that it has something to do with the guy who lives in New Jersey that was the last president. But her words, they're not conservative enough. They're not conservative enough. They're not Christian enough. And if you don't believe me, this is her pinned tweet on her Twitter account from 22 June 2020, over a year ago. She says, and I quote, "I'm going on record now. If they try to cancel Christianity, if they try to force me to apologize or recant my faith, I will not bend, I will not waver, I will not break. On Christ. On Christ, the solid rock, I stand, and am proud to be an American." This is how you fight. This is how you win. The leftists are terrified. You know what they're really terrified of? You want to know what the real thing that terrifies them is? South of our border and in Latin America, there are 600 million Christians ready to come into this country. 600 million plus, actually now. Yes. They may be Catholics. Some Protestants have an issue with that. You give me a choice between choosing the atheistic, mentally ill, trans, whatever, leftists, atheists on the West Coast and in D.C. You give me a choice between that and standing with a Catholic, with a Christian, with somebody at least attempting to honor God, do the very best they can. We've all fallen short. Have we not? Is not what the Bible says. None of us have yet to resist unto blood, striving against sin. We are all imperfect, all fallen, all in need of mercy and grace and forgiveness. That is Christian moral value, and that is really what terrifies the left. Because they're starting to realize it. That's why there was a 10-point swing for Latinos away from the parentheses D, which Jenna Ellis refers to now, the Republican Party, as parentheses D light, the Republicans. And that's what truly is the case. Conservatism is the way forward, but educated, smart conservatism is the way forward. And our governor is one of the best that has ever served anywhere. In this respect, like in so many others, he is going to put on a clinic on how you defeat liberals and progressives. We are going to evoke thought on this issue, not emotion. Let me say that again. We are going to evoke thought on this issue and not emotion. Lest anyone ask the question, wait a minute, free internet, isn't that kind of communist socialist? Yeah. Think about that. Do you think the people in the streets in Cuba are going to refuse the free internet? Oh no. They're not going to, and that will out it. That will out the entire game. They'll take anything free you give them. And what does that tell you about how they value capitalism in Cuba? Think about that for a while you ponder ancient Rome and its wisdom. God bless. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.